Hi, everyone. We're so happy to have you here today. I am Abby Ivory, the director of Ivory Innovations. And on behalf of the Ivory Innovations team, I would like to welcome you all to this event highlighting the best practices and challenges related to accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, as most of you know them. Quickly, I want to just say thank you to our panelists, partners, and our advisory board members, as well as the sponsors of Ivory Innovations this year, which include the Larry H. and Gail Miller Family Foundation, the Dominion Energy Charitable Foundation, BMC, Autodesk, ABC Supply, Simpson Strong Tie, the Intermountain Foundation, and the Clark and Christine Ivory Foundation, as well as the Charles Koch Foundation. Ivory Innovations was founded in 2018, and we have been thrilled to see so much excitement and energy around the solutions to housing affordability. And what's been fun over the last couple years is we've really been able to see quite a few different solutions that have focused on ADUs. And we recognize that there are many challenges that different companies, governments, and nonprofits that have come through this process are facing. And we're hoping that this panel today can kind of help address some of the challenges that everyone's been seeing. And so I would like to introduce our moderator today to this panel, and her name is Leila Banijamali. She's a Stanford law grad, and she is a serial entrepreneur, she's a very well-rounded woman, and she is the co-founder and CEO of Symbium right now, who is last year's Ivory Prize winner. And so she herself is looking to kind of streamline this planning and permitting process for ADUs. And I'll kind of turn it over to Leila to let her tell you more about what she's doing, and then kind of get into everything with our panelists.
Thanks, Abby. Thanks so much. So the entire Symbium team, obviously really proud to be Ivory Prize recipients and to contribute to this important work in partnership with cities. So let me paint the problem picture. In the last 10 years, in California alone, which is where Symbium is based, less than 50% of the homes that were required to keep up with population growth were actually built. And that lack of housing is one of the key reasons for a surge in prices across the state. And this is not just happening in California, but all across the US. So this impacts renters, it impacts viable, affordable housing options, it impacts commuters, and it impacts everyone's quality of life. So we see ADUs as one solution to the housing crisis. And the ADUs have been a hot topic here in California for at least the past 2 years due to the statewide ADU laws that have accomplished the following: expanding the capacity to accommodate ADUs and JADUs, which is just means junior accessory dwelling units. It's essentially conversions in zones that allow single family and multifamily uses. And then the second, streamlining the approval process. So getting ADUs built faster, faster approval timelines, pre-approved plans, which some cities are now making available to the public with help from local architects and developers. And so this has huge potential for impact on housing affordability, but real challenges still exist, and we're going to talk about some of those today. So why is Symbium focused here? So Symbium is a tech company, again, based in San Francisco, that is focused primarily on streamlining residential construction, the regulatory portion of residential construction and planning for homeowners and for our city partners. And earlier this year, we launched Build, which is available at build.symbium.com. And Build is a free tool that allows anyone, whether you're a city planner or a homeowner or a developer, to visualize whether an ADU is allowed on a particular property, to browse ADU designs on that property, and to understand next steps to getting an ADU built. Symbium Build coverage extends to all of California, so that's 58 counties and over 12.5 million properties. And we did this with the help of our city and county partners, with the help of Ivory Innovations, and with other critical stakeholders in the space. So with that, I'd like to introduce you to other key stakeholders in this important and ever-growing ADU space. So here we are. Each of our 3 speakers will have 10 minutes to introduce their important work. From there, we'll finish with a panel discussion about 20 minutes, and we'll take your questions, so please submit them in the chat. Today's speakers are going to give you a diversity of perspectives that help us think through all of the ways to unlock the potential for ADUs. All right, get started. So handing it off to Eli.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to join everyone there at the Ivory Institute. I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully I don't have any technology bugs while I'm sharing the story on ADUs. Let me share here. All right. So really, ADUs are bringing back a historic housing type. And I've been involved in this ever since I was a builder myself. I still am. And I now serve on the Planning Commission in Portland. But along the way, I helped found a website called the accessorydwellings.org. And I've been really trying to help communities across the country make this housing type more broadly available. So this is going to be a little bit of a whirlwind. So stand with it. I do some work with AARP, and their membership is vast, biggest membership organization in the country. And they know that 3/4 of people over 50 years old want to stay in their own community. They want to age in place. And 1/3 of homeowners would love to build an ADU for help, income, or companionship. And meanwhile, at the younger ages, we got millennials who just can't seem to afford to get out of the house because there's no entry positions in the housing market that they can live in a neighborhood that they know and love. So ADUs are not a new thing. That's the first thing I want to say. We're re-legalizing a historic housing type. And all over the country, we've got different versions of this housing type, from Chicago to the Southwest and the Northeast. And of course, there's some famous ADU dwellers you might recognize. The Fonz, he lived on Mr. Cunningham's garage. Thomas Jefferson, before building the big house in Monticello, he and his wife and their first child lived in a little accessory dwelling unit, a traditional thing to do in the United States. You build a small house first, and then you move into the big one. Ernie and Bert lived in the basement, of course, of an ADU. Mark and Mindy lived in the attic, and Oscar lived in a front yard ADU that's not legal in most zoning codes, but nonetheless, a small house for a small guy. But ADUs are taking off around the country right now. Back in 2000, a lot of cities allowed ADUs in their codes, but wrote the rules in such a way that not very many got built. Now that's changing. And you're seeing, here's just a few illustrations of the kind of structures that are popping up in backyards all over the country. And some cities have really gone for the juggernaut on this. Portland, Oregon was getting 20 ADUs a year ballpark, with some really easy codes to use. And then from 2010, when I and some others started getting active, it bumped up to 660 ADUs a year. That's well over one per day. And if you think that's a breeding ground for ADUs, look at Los Angeles. When the state mandate went into effect in California with some teeth to it, unlike the prior state mandate, which didn't really have teeth, California ADUs jumped from 15 to 6,747 over a 6-year period. And some states have mandates that you have to allow an ADU in every city within the state over a certain size. That'd be Washington, D.C., where I come from. I like to call it a state. Vermont, New Hampshire, and then of course the whole West Coast, except for Alaska, where every city is required to allow ADUs. And California, as mentioned by Leila, requires cities to allow 2 of them. It's basically a triplex state, one junior ADU and a detached one. So what is an ADU? It's a second dwelling unit, fully self-contained on the same lot as a primary single-family home. And as you have heard, there's 100 names for them. Unfortunately, we use the name accessory dwelling unit, which is accessories like a clothing accessory and dwellings like dweeb, and units like the last name we should call for a place, someone's home. But that's what planners use, and that's what we're stuck with, I think. So here's some flavors of ADUs. They come in many. They can be a detached structure. That's probably your most visible form of one that you're most familiar with. But they also can be an addition. You add on a little side to a house and put a new door on it, and you've got a separate dwelling. It can be a garage conversion of an existing structure, or sometimes you build a new garage with an ADU on top. And then some others, it can be a basement ADU. Those are some of the least expensive ADUs if there's head height. A new house on the bottom left here can be built with an ADU into it, so it's new construction. Sometimes part of a main house, you just don't need the little bedroom on the side, so it becomes a separate dwelling unit. And occasionally people will convert an attic to an ADU. And then there's the old school way of doing it, where you build the ADU first, and then you build the main house afterwards. And it's not the same as a detached bedroom. I built a couple of these. It can be fully self-contained. It can be a legal place to live, to sleep, but it doesn't have a kitchen. And ADUs do have kitchens. And it's also not the same as a tiny house, which are also extremely popular. I love them. I got a couple of them. But these are not buildings. They're vehicles. That's the distinction there. At least most tiny homes are vehicles. So who lives in ADUs? You know, this could be all over the map. I've got a friend who teaches college up in Seattle, and the way she could afford to live in the community where she was teaching was to rent an ADU. It can be an older person who wants to take care of the grandkids, but doesn't want to live in the same house as the grandkids. Or it can be someone who's just retiring and just wants to live in their neighborhood, but they don't want to, where they know everybody on the street, but they can't afford a main house and they wouldn't want to have to maintain it. So why are cities allowing and encouraging ADUs? The main reason is expanding housing choice. If you want to live in a small home, like 600, 800 square feet, you shouldn't have to live in a big building. There should be a way to do that in a neighborhood. They fit in well. So for communities trying to consider how to allow some less expensive housing in the neighborhood, and they really don't want to have a 40-unit apartment building, ADUs are more politically palatable since they fit in nicely to backyards. They're flexible over time. One reason people love ADUs is that they might initially be just a rental for supplemental income. Then maybe the house takes over. I wish my teenager would love to have their own ADU. And then maybe you downsize into the ADU and rent out the main house over time. And maybe along the way as a short-term rental or an office, it's just got a lot of uses and people like the flexibility. It's great for multi-generational housing. And demographics, we just don't have large families to fill these large homes we're building right now. From 1950 to 2008, average home size went from 983 square feet to 2,500, while family size decreased. So we have now almost 4 times as much space per person that we used to. 85% of homes are 2 or more bedrooms, and over 60% of households have just 1 or 2 people. So we have this mismatch in house size. ADUs are smaller, and that makes them cheaper to heat and cool and to maintain, and they're cheaper to build, and they have a smaller carbon footprint. Affordability is a driving factor in our housing markets. And interestingly, about 2013, we studied this in Portland and found that 15 to 20% of ADUs are rented for nothing, like zero. That means someone's making that house available to somebody as sort of a safety net, maybe a loved one or a family member who otherwise would be out there competing on the housing market. Most of them are rented in the market rate range, but it's amazing that people actually make them available for free. They're a great place for small and emerging architects and contractors to get going. Sometimes, and I read about this in Salt Lake, there's illegal ADUs out there. And by creating a legal process to occupy them, people actually deal with the railing or the smoke detector that doesn't work. So when communities are worried about legalizing ADUs, they're scared the sky's gonna fall. Now, even in Portland, which we have so many ADUs, it's still less than 3% of the lots in the city. You can't really tell from the street it's happening. And for a city, it's important to realize that what really is key is to understand who actually builds these things, because it's the only kind of housing in our country that I know of that's built by amateurs, folks who do not know what they're doing. Subdivisions are the tool of professional developers, and so are the 4+ story buildings, but ADUs are built by mom and pops who are facing permitting challenges. They maybe never managed an architect or contractor. They're gonna have to write a big check they're not used to. There's not many efficiencies of scale. There's not many financing options. We'll learn more about that from Fannie Mae. And not everyone's ready to be a landlord, which may happen sometime during the ADU's life. So what cities do is they write codes that respond to local concerns about fitting in, but also get used. And to do that, we have to avoid discretionary processes. Someone who's building something for the first time doesn't want to go in and wonder, will I get this approved after I write a $2,000 check, or maybe not? They might just not even start. Parking mandates, sometimes communities require additional parking space, and there's literally nowhere on the lot to put it. Owner occupancy requirements can block financing for ADUs. And sometimes people have use restrictions that target ADUs specifically. If you've got a rule for short-term rentals, that's great, but have it apply to every type of housing in your community, not singling out ADUs for it. But ADUs should make sure that they fit in. So limiting how tall the ADU can be, how big it can be relative to the main house, the location on the site, maybe it needs to be behind the main house or underneath it. Maybe a 1-story design, you can do anything you want, but if it's going to be 2 stories, it needs to match the house in certain ways, or go through conditional use if you want to do something exotic. Most ADU codes are 1 page or less. So for those trying to craft an ADU, you don't have to think it's going to be a big process. And I actually worked in the ABCs of ADUs. On 1 page, we got a really great synopsis on the main elements of any ADU code. The last thing I'm going to suggest is you got to do a little hand holding for the homeowner. Homeowners are not used to going through processes with the city. So providing them a guide that they can download online to find out what the rules are in their community is important. And don't forget the real estate agents. They're involved in every transaction pretty much, and they want to be able to educate their prospective purchasers or sellers whether there's an opportunity to build an ADU on that lot. And lastly, tell the story. I mean, the local media is always going to have things to say about NIMBYs against YIMBYs and land use reforms, but ADUs are all about the people who live them and how they work for people's individual homes and their lives. And getting that story out there is critical. When we started the website, accessorydwellings.org, our first goal was to tell the actual stories of built ADUs and how they worked for the families. And I'll close with this story. This is a family, Carrie and Sterling Whitley. in Santa Cruz, California. They partnered with Habitat for Humanity and they built an ADU so that their daughter, Brenda, who couldn't otherwise afford to live in the neighborhood, could live in the ADU, help take care of her parents. And then maybe at some point down the road, they could switch places when the parents don't need as much space. So there's nonprofits around the country, you'll hear from one today, who are leaders on ADUs. And it's just a great housing type. I hope that more cities make that available to their residents. And I'll leave it there. Oh, additional resources if you like. The ABCs of ADUs, the website I mentioned, Back to a Revolution by Cole Peterson, who's a great friend and colleague. And AARP nationally has put out a guide to accessory dwelling units. Thank you.
Thank you, Eli. That was fantastic. Great start to kick us off on the ABCs of ADUs. And from here, we're going to hand it over to Jonathan Lawless. All yours, Jonathan.
All right. Thank you, guys. Can you hear and see me?
Yes.
Can you guys hear me? Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. Eli, that was fantastic. Like, I almost feel like we should do a mic drop there. That we covered so much ground in such little time. That was great. Thanks to everyone for having me here. As mentioned, my name is Jonathan Lawless. I'm from Fannie Mae. And for those that don't know, Fannie Mae, our name is actually a shorthand for an acronym. Is how that name came about. FNMA turned into Fannie Mae. And so needless to say, we are always drawn to confusing acronyms. And so the topic of ADUs, of course, has become something we spent a lot of time focusing on. I'm actually from our single family side of the business, which is a good way to sort of start the talk about how we do financing for ADUs, because unlike the traditional sort of affordable housing option where you're building multiple units in one place, this is sort of trying to create multiple units in multiple places. And as many know, and many who have done developments, developing a single multifamily business, I mean, there's some history there, there's some traditional financing sources, but of course the downside is that you've got to find the land and the willingness to build lots of units in one place. So when you think about ADUs, it's a little bit the flip side. There aren't as many traditional financing ways to build and finance ADUs. But on the other hand, as Eli very, very keenly pointed out, it takes advantage of land that's already available. It takes advantage of private builders, private managers, and in some ways sort of scales through organic growth at the individual level. And so I'm going to talk through some financing options, but I will say that for those who are interested in ADUs, there's some tremendous resources out there. Just Googling accessory dwelling units, don't worry, you're not going to find anything besides this topic with those 3 words. You'll find a lot of very creative solutions that have been deployed by numerous locations. There's also a really great research piece Leila reminded me of when we were speaking earlier from the Turner Center. And so, I highly recommend that piece. Happy to post a lot of these. I don't know if the Ivory Center can help us post some of the materials for people to go back and get, but let me just say there's been a lot of work and thought done in this. And so for those interested, take advantage of the available resources. But let me start sort of with the traditional way that people will finance an ADU. Sort of if you're a homeowner and you've got space in your backyard and you want to create an ADU, probably the easiest and most expedient way to pay for it is just write a check. If you are fortunate enough to be able to write a $100,000, $200,000 check to build an ADU. Of course, that's a little rare. And so people will then quickly turn to some financing options. One obvious financing option for a homeowner is to use a second lien or a HELOC. So in other words, take another mortgage against your property and use the cash from that to build the ADU. You could also use your mortgage itself. So if you have equity in your home, let's say you've got a home that's worth $500,000, you have a $200,000 loan, well, you can go and extract another $100,000, $200,000, increase your loan size, use those proceeds to pay for the development. And then of course, there's a series of other kind of creative ways that people have talked about. Again, you'll see a lot of these models where other public subsidies or other public programs help support the financing. And I'll cover a couple of those throughout some of my comments here. Let me just start by saying, when we think about ADUs and financing, it's really critical to sort of understand the use case, right? So who am I building it for? Who is going to live in the unit? Who's going to be the homeowner that I'm targeting with the particular solution? So I'm going to sort of take that lens a little bit as an approach to talk through some of the financing solutions. And I'm going to turn off this monitor in the background, which might be annoying some of you. Okay, so let me start with helping the rich. And this is going to sound like a strange affordable housing solution. But I sort of call this, if you've got a Black Lives Movement or Black Lives Matters sign in your front yard, well, maybe you should have an ADU in your backyard. So, I have plenty of neighbors who say like, all are welcome here. And I look around, I don't see anybody else. And so the thought is, take people in rich neighborhoods who are committed to supporting affordable housing or other efforts and sort of target them as a potential place for creating ADUs. So now sometimes these are people that can have cash, but let's just talk a basic structure. I want to introduce a product that exists in the conventional space, in the conventional mortgage space. There's also a government program that does something similar, but how to use a mortgage to basically finance and pay for an ADU. So this is the situation I mentioned earlier. You've got a person who's a property owner. They have a loan that's well below the value of their property, and so they have equity remaining. So one program that we offer is called Homestyle Renovation. Homestyle is kind of the brand name for it that we offer to many of our lenders. And the way this program works is it allows somebody to refinance their mortgage, which if you haven't done so recently, it's a great opportunity to do so now, given the very, very low rates. But you refinance your mortgage, you take the cash out, but one of the key features, there's kind of a couple of really nice features of this. Number one is, traditionally, when you take equity out of your home, you have to pay fees to do that. With Homestyle Renovation, there are no fees associated with it. So you can 100% take cash out and not have to pay for the right to do that. In fact, you can go all the way up to 97% loan to value ratio, 95, 97%, depending on your income level. And so you can take a meaningful amount of cash if you have that equity. One other feature that's pretty nice about this particular product is that we will allow the consumer to escrow the first 6 months of their payment. And so that while the ADU is being developed and before the income is able to start being generated, the consumer actually doesn't have to pay on that mortgage. And so that allows for that time to pass, for the unit to be built, the income to be generated from the unit if that's the objective. And so then when they can resume payments, they're able to resume them already with potentially some rental income, if that's what they're choosing to use the product for. So a couple of nice features in terms of using the mortgage itself. Frankly, when we look at cities, particular cities that are really struggling with generating supply, the one thing they're not struggling with is home values. And so home values have accelerated, creating a lot of equity and value, and particularly some of the nicer neighborhoods that allows for this. One other nice feature about this, particularly if a program is structured to use those homes as a place to target low-income consumers. So let's call it 80. We want the renter to be 80 AMI or lower. This really helps address one of the key issues that we spent a lot of time in this past year focused on, which is just residential segregation. And so, if you could create the opportunity for people with lower income to move into nicer neighborhoods with nicer schools, nicer amenities, that really is huge. So, think along the lines of how do you incentivize wealthier homeowners who have equity to create rental unit for low income. Think about tax incentives, think about how you address changes in property tax, right? This is a big issue with ADUs. You add $200,000 to the property, you just increase property taxes. So are there ways to create tax incentives to basically allow it to be easier to do and cheaper to do from a tax perspective? I think Eli touched on something too, and that is super important. We'll come back to it frequently in this discussion, I think, which is it's really hard to be a builder and a developer. And so as much as you can take that burden off of the homeowner, provide them incentives, provide them support to do it, to create this low income housing, they've got the equity to do it. And frankly, increasing $100,000, $200,000 in value at today's low mortgage rates on a 30-year term is not a huge monthly expense. And so, there's a great opportunity. So again, to use the acronym version, it's the BLM in front, ADU in back, really important thing, particularly for nicer neighborhoods and wealthier consumers. So if you move down the sort of spectrum of wealth in terms of, if your target audience is homeowners that may be struggling, don't have as much equity, or have equity but don't have as much income, first of all, you could always go back to this renovation product. Now, the one thing I will say that's always problematic with using renovation product is that if the homeowner relies on the income from the rental to be able to qualify for the mortgage, then you run into some problems, because until there is a unit generating income, typically those who are underwriting a single family mortgage will say, well, there's no income to underwrite here, so I'm not going to use it to qualify, and that kind of ends up shutting a lot of people out of the market. And so we've seen a lot of creative solutions to this, particularly in just terms of giving bridge financing. So in other words, somebody will finance from the period that the ADU gets developed to when it's complete and rented. Now, once it's rented, you have income that you can use to qualify. And so now then that bridge financing can then be refinanced, again, using the same exact product, refinanced into a conventional loan. That way it lowers the overall cost of the financing, again, consolidates it with the mortgage. The other problem here too is the question of whether or not it appraises. And so, the question is, if I add $100,000 ADU unit to my home, does that create $100,000 of value? And so, we spend a lot of time working with appraisers. Once these things take more hold in a neighborhood, that gets easier to do because you start seeing the value established over time. But in the early part, that's just something to watch out for on the single family front. Okay, so kind of moving away from the single family mortgage as the source of potentially financing, and a little bit to more sort of financing it in a pool. Again, this is where I think the Turner Center has a lot of really interesting research where, instead of the loan coming from a standard traditional conventional source, lots of local banks might provide, a pool of money that's available for either the bridge financing component or potentially offer maybe 100 LTV, a much more generous term around sort of a separate loan or mortgage, that as long as the money is being used and it meets one of their CRA obligations. So that's always something to think about. Another interesting model that we see out in with Cal HFA is you have a nonprofit entity that's willing to create a fund for then another lender or another entity then to distribute that good rate of financing, distribute that through single individual loans. And then that sort of intermediary who you're providing just one singular financing at a beneficial rate, that then can sort of distribute that, sort of help manage the ADU development. So that's an interesting model. One other one that I've seen in the city of Boston is just where the city provides a $50,000 sort of, basically we'll give you the money to build an ADU, but when you sell the home, the $50,000 from the home sale then goes back to the city. So the money in a sense will recycle itself. So again, those are sort of more or less different sort of than standard mortgage lending or standard HELOC or first lien mortgage ways of financing. So I'm going to share just a couple of a little bit more off the wall ideas that have come up in various conversations that I think are interesting. One is supporting organizations like Dweller or United Dwelling, two very, very interesting entities where, traditionally as we talk about ADUs, it's a homeowner who's developing the ADU. And so they're figuring out how to finance it if somebody's financing it for them. But the other way to think about it is that put the burden of financing on somebody else, an entity entirely different that will use somebody's land to create a rental unit. Okay, so these models like the United Dwelling model, for example, will find two-car garages. They'll come in, they'll replace the whole thing with an ADU unit. Once it's generating money, some of that money will go to the homeowner, and they keep some of it for the management fee. And so basically, they're managing everything. They're sort of running, if you will, sort of a distributed rental scheme. Their financing is separate, and then the homeowner has more or less involvement. And so if you take that model and just sort of expand who potentially could do that, we could even think a millennial who might be interested in buying a home but can't afford, the $1.3 million home that's in the city that they want to live in. Well, they might be interested still in getting some percentage of the appreciation of a home, and they might be willing for themselves to finance an ADU unit on somebody else's property. And sort of in exchange for that, they'll pay them rent, they'll sign a 6-year lease, whatever it might be. And maybe in exchange, they'll get access to that unit, and potentially one way to think about it is maybe some appreciation of the property over time. And so that shared equity structure and investment is sort of similar to what I mentioned with Boston. So Boston invests the money, but then they just get it back. Well, one way to get it back without experience the loss of sort of the opportunity cost over time is that you get it back plus some percentage of however much that home appreciates. So, back to my $500,000 example, let's say the home plus the ADU unit ends up appraising at $550,000, and the person who's spending money on the ADU asks for 10% of the sort of upside. So if that home goes from $550,000 to call it $650,000 and it sells, the person would make back their original investment plus 10% of the $100,000 in appreciation, so $10,000. So they get their investment back. They get a very small but moderate return, but at least it's a return that is not zero. And so you can get more recyclability and more interest, I think, if the rate of return is higher. Now, of course, you could go to the extreme where the rate of return could be more market rate, and you could sort of see larger shares of the appreciation split. Personally, I tend to sort of be a little bit cautious with those type of examples because the last thing we want is people selling their homes and losing 40% of their appreciation because they didn't understand the terms of it. So certainly on the friendly side of shared equity, there's a lot of potential. But in any case, you have to be sort of careful of those potential consequences. I'll stop there. I'll throw out one last sort of thought, which is, from a utility perspective, putting solar panels on an ADU, Eli mentioned examples like very energy efficient ADUs. And so you can almost think of ADUs as a potential to generate energy, not only for the unit itself, but maybe even for the home. And so there are some potential finance benefits and potentially financing benefits if the unit itself is able to be an energy creator rather than an energy consumer. So I'll end with that slightly further afield idea, and then I'll flip it back to Leila.
All right, thanks so much, Jonathan. So a little bit of a primer on financing for ADUs. That's one of the major questions that homeowners typically have is how to finance the cost. So from here, I'm going to hand it over to last but certainly not least, Nicole Joslin, Executive Director of Community Powered Workshop. Nicole, take it away.
Thank you. It's great to be here, everyone. I'm going to share some slides. I think that is up. Okay, cool. I'm going to trust that somebody will jump in if anybody can't see a slide on their screen right now. So thank y'all for the introductions and for everybody who spoke before. I've been taking notes over here on the side. I am Nicole Joslin, the Executive Director of Community Powered Workshop. We're a nonprofit organization based in Austin, Texas. We provide architectural planning services, and we work alongside communities to create equitable and powerful places. We do this through community engaged research, social impact design, and collaborative planning. And one of our primary programs is the Alley Flat Initiative, which has brought me here today. Through this program, we help homeowners build accessory dwelling units in their backyard that participate in our city's affordable housing program. So this program started around 15 years ago as a design research project at the University of Texas Center for Sustainable Development in partnership with the Guadalupe Neighborhood Development Corporation and with our organization. It's come a long way since then, and we now, as Community Powered Workshop, we operate sort of the day-to-day of this program, where we provide architectural services and technical assistance to homeowners building ADUs. We also, as an organization, are very active in advocating for policy and regulatory changes that make it easier to build both affordable and market rate units across Austin. So before I dig further into our program specifically, I thought I would give a little bit of a lay of the land of ADUs in Austin. And I was real proud of this number, this 1539 built since 2010, until I just saw all of Eli's numbers about Portland and LA, and it made me feel a little small. But Austin's a little bit smaller maybe. But we have built around 1,500 ADUs since 2010. And actually 85% of those have been built since 2015 when we revised our ADU ordinance. And that revision included allowing them on smaller lots, increasing the square footage that they were allowed to be, and reducing parking requirements, which obviously increased the uptake of ADUs across the city a lot. Of the 85% that have been built since 2015, 57% of those have actually been built as a redevelopment of an existing single family lot. So those ADUs have been built in conjunction with a new primary house as well.
Hey, Nicole, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
I think we're having trouble seeing your slides.
Okay.
I don't think you're moving them. Are you moving them forward?
I was, yes.
Can you see it on your screen? We can't see it on our screen.
I can. Can you see, did it change?
We just see the first slide here.
Okay. I can do this without slides too. It just might not be as
up to you, or you can
fun.
leave it up so people can see what the organization that you're in.
Let me try one more time. Can you guys see that?
Yes, can see that. Yes.
Okay.
It's
Can you see
the
that?
Alley Flat Initiative. Yep, we can see the next slide there. Yep,
All
thanks
right.
for doing that.
Yeah. Okay. So this is the one that I was talking about with the 1,500. Thank you for letting me know. So here's the 1,539 that have been built since 2010, and 85% of those have been built since 2015. And of those, 57% have been built as a redevelopment of an existing single family lot. And we see this having a lot of benefits, actually. We see this as an opportunity for more diverse homeownership opportunities across our city, where most of the time we're seeing in this situation where it's a complete redevelopment of a lot, those units are being sold separately. So there's a lot of different price points and different types of housing being made available in our existing single family neighborhoods, which we think is great. But we also see that as ADUs playing some kind of role in the displacement pressure that residents are feeling in our city. And displacement is a really big conversation in our city right now. So we at the Alley Flat Initiative are sort of specifically interested in that situation where how ADUs can be an opportunity for homeowners to be able to stay in place and stabilize their housing. So this is what our ADUs look like on the ground. This is just a few of the units that we've built over the last few years. And as I shared, we look specifically at the need for increasing access to affordable housing in Central Austin neighborhoods, as well as curbing the displacement pressure existing homeowners are experiencing. And you'll also notice that these are all detached units, and in Austin right now, our ADU ordinance only allows for these to be detached. So we've seen firsthand that ADU development enables homeowners to build wealth and increase their housing stability while also providing new, affordable, family-friendly rental housing. Our program specifically layers affordable housing development incentives provided by the city with technical assistance from our organization to make the development process faster and easier for homeowners and community-based builders. Our incentives come in the form of permit fee waivers and expedited permit review that sort of makes that development process a little bit cheaper and faster. These units that we've built over the last few years have housed families of all sizes and types, and as part of participating in this program, the homeowner agrees to rent the unit at 80% median family income for at least 5 years. And over the years, we've also experienced our shares of obstacles, and I'll share a few of those with y'all right now, and I'm sure we'll dig into them in the Q&A. So we originally started this program as an architectural question of how do you design a small house that can fit on a lot of different lots around town, and it became very quickly apparent that this is much more complex than just an architectural challenge. It also crosses over to public policy, financial systems, and development regulations. And we've sort of organized the challenges that we've faced in a few buckets just to kind of wrap our heads around it. One of which being freedom. So this is about land development regulations that limit the design solutions that are possible by regulating placement, parking, and size. And they also limit a lot of times where the units can be built, including what neighborhoods and what types of lots they're allowed on. We've experienced our fair share of process challenges where we found that the policies and procedures regulating this type of development are unclear and difficult to navigate, making the permitting process intimidating and inaccessible to homeowners and sometimes even professionals. Additionally, becoming a first-time landlord for that homeowner once the unit actually gets built can be a pretty daunting task in itself. And then we see a lot of challenges on the feasibility side. The high cost of construction just makes it out of reach for a lot of lower income homeowners. We've seen a lot of inability to access financing for ADUs, especially if you're planning to rent it to generate that additional income to qualify for that loan. And then we've also seen a lot of uncertainty around property tax appraisal that make it really difficult to make rational financial decisions about this type of investment. So we as an organization have also advocated for policy and regulatory changes to try to sort of pick apart these buckets. We have been active in advocating for changes in our ADU ordinance, such as the ones in 2015. We've also tried to work alongside our city policymakers to improve incentive programs like those, the fee waivers and things like that for development. We've also advocated for the availability of public funds and financial tools to help combat displacement pressure. And most recently, we've been working along our city's housing department to make ADUs just more accessible to homeowners. And through that effort, we helped to conduct a survey through our publicly owned utility where we heard that the majority of homeowners do believe ADUs can be financially beneficial, but they're held back by concerns about permitting and property taxes. So our housing department is now sort of exploring what role they may play as a public entity to create more predictable appraisal processes for ADUs, to create some sort of pre-approval process for ADU plans, and exploring how they might be able to assist in the development of an ADU financing tool. So those are all very exciting to us as a nonprofit organization that sort of sees these different partnerships as really important to pushing ADUs as a real solution for homeowners. And then just sort of to close out my little spiel here, we've learned a lot over the years in operating the Alley Flat Initiative, and what we've really learned is that there is no one single challenge to building an ADU for a homeowner. It's usually a really complicated stack of challenges, and we need a complicated stack of solutions to open up this opportunity for them. When you take into account the fact that throughout our history, housing construction has been dominated by large-scale, well-resourced developers, and our housing finance system has embedded pathways to homeownership and wealth generation for only certain people in our country, it's not a surprise that when it comes to micro-development like ADU construction, individual homeowners in historically disinvested communities are at a disadvantage. We believe that to bring ADUs to scale as a meaningful affordable housing and wealth building solution for those historically excluded from the development process, we not only need policy change, but also lending products that homeowners can leverage, public funds to incentivize development, and wraparound resources that can help guide homeowners through feasibility, design, and construction. And I look forward to the conversation that follows. Here's my contact information if anybody wants it. And I'll send it back over to you. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Nicole. Fantastic. Really appreciate it. So from here, we're going to go ahead and take some questions. I think I want to start with one for all of you. Maybe if you can give just a quick response each on this first question. So we've heard about some of the challenges, obstacles of ADUs, everything from regulatory obstacles to financing, construction costs, and others, as we mentioned. If you can each just give me a quick, one sentence response to what is the single greatest barrier in your mind to ADUs being implemented? Nicole, let's start with you.
I guess I would just say, it depends on who you're wanting to remove the barriers for. From the homeowner perspective, I would say it's a really complicated process. It needs special expertise, and the more you can either remove the need for that expertise or help increase access to it, the better.
Great. Eli, how about you?
There's still a lot of codes out there saying that you can only build an ADU for a family member, and when the family member leaves, you have to take the ADU down. And with codes like that, you're just not going to see them get built. But I'll say one more is private agreements. A lot of homeowner associations prohibit ADUs. So even if the city legalizes them, if the HOA blocks you just can't build it. In some cities, almost every house is in an HOA, especially in new development.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Jonathan, single greatest barrier in your mind?
I'll echo sort of what both Nicole and Eli said, but I would say the barrier is for me, it's really just the complexity. Each situation is so nuanced that when you want to scale it, just everything is sort of fighting against you, from the local regulations to the land you're building it on, to the nature of how you're trying to finance it. So it's hard to find one thing that can solve all those problems enough times in a row to really make it something that has, could really be defined as getting to scale.
Great. Yeah, and I think, definitely have seen financing be a major issue as well. And I think that's a major challenge for homeowners is these things are not, couple $1,000s and it's the one and done. There's a much larger cost associated with getting them done. So, getting creative solutions, which are available in the public. All right, so Eli, question for you. And by the way, I'll just throw some questions out. Doesn't necessarily mean that everyone has to answer all these questions, and sometimes they'll be a little bit more directed. But of course, if you have something to contribute, feel free. Eli, is there a place where ADUs make sense versus not make sense?
Great question. Even in the cities where ADUs are taking off, like Portland and in LA, the most likely spot to see them is where they can rent for a lot of money. So the economics drive it. So if you can see an area that's got low density residential development and high rents, that's like a petri dish to build ADUs. But they get built all over the place just for family reasons. So even in Western Colorado or South Dakota, people are excited about them just because it fits their family dynamics, even when the economics don't drive it. So you see them both places, but if you're going to see the really big numbers, that's in areas where residential densities are low and property values are high.
Great. And we know cities like Los Angeles are doing some great work with retroactive approvals of ADUs that were built before these laws came about. Nicole, question for you. We know homeowners are not developers, so how do we encourage and help interested homeowners overcome major obstacles? And are there things cities can do to support them?
Yeah, I think making the permitting process pretty simple would be very helpful. Usually our permitting process is sort of geared towards professional developers with very large projects that they do everywhere. And homeowners are not developers. So the more simplified we can make that process and the more sort of scaled down that process can be to the scale of the development itself, the better. So more transparency and access to resources to navigate that process is great.
Great. And Jonathan, before the construction process, I think the largest challenge to homeowners, again, being, what I've seen, cost being one of the largest ones. What do you think about the dynamics of including ADUs in new construction versus trying to add them after the fact when it comes to financing?
Yeah, it's a fantastic trend that we're seeing in the industry. Even large builders are thinking about adding ADUs as per their normal development. So I think adding it in there is a great idea. Even for regular sort of consumers building a home on their own, having builders be aware of the fact that that could be an option to the home would be really great, because again, you can finance that sort of as part of the original purchase of the home, even on a one-off basis. And then you have the added benefit to the consumer that they're able to generate income, house another family member. And so the opportunities are greatest on new homes because it hasn't been built. It doesn't have the constraints that other homes might have. So the new home process is definitely a great one.
And in your view, Jonathan, have you seen cities that you think are leading the way when it comes to helping, with regards to financing or anything with regards to land trusts that you're aware of?
It's a good question. I think the cities where it's most common, Portland, California, Boston, those have been the cities that have been most aggressive in it. In terms of the financing, again, I think every sort of thing is a little bit nuanced. Turner Center report's a great one that has a bunch of examples, but I don't think there's a city in my mind, maybe some of the other folks here, Austin and others have done some creative things, but I don't think there are standout cities where they've sort of cracked the nut. In other words, there's a financing process that, really helps get it to scale quickly or simplifies it in some miraculous way.
Question to you all, is there, oh, sorry, you were gonna say something, Eli?
Well, I don't think someone's paired a community. I started the Community Land Trust in Portland, was part of that group, and I don't think someone's paired that yet with ADUs, but there are communities that have done them as condominiums. I've done a couple. I know in Austin they've done some. And once you separate ownership that way, then the ADU might be getting close to the price point where the city could help fund it to make it a land trust unit.
And then for all of you, is there a way to incentivize ADUs to make sure that they go to people who need them most from an affordability perspective? What are, we mentioned some ways, but let's talk a little bit more about expanding that concept. Maybe Eli, I'll start with you again.
Sure, I think that it's a great goal. I honestly think the first ADUs in a community, we should be fine with the market rate ones because they'll be beautiful, like little violins, and people will like the idea and become okay with that being part of the neighborhood. But I love it once you get over those early adopter hurdles that I wouldn't want to burden a new affordable housing project with, then they're great affordable options. So it could be done as condos, and also do things like legalized internal conversions, because those are the least expensive ADUs you can build, you know, converting your garage or a basement. So making sure those are legal is important. There are a bunch of nonprofits that have experimented with, like LA Moss and group in Sacramento, they're experimenting with affordable housing, mixing the affordable housing tools with the ADU model. But to be honest, they're all really fledgling. They're just figuring it out. So I think that's a story to tell in the next couple of years when there's more success stories to share.
Yeah, there seems to be quite a big disconnect, because the whole ADU legislations that came out, I can, on the California side at least, was really intended to address affordable housing.
Yeah.
So it's an
There's a
interesting
capital
problem
A
to solve.
affordable, and there's a lowercase a affordable. And
Yeah.
so it's definitely intended to create less expensive housing than otherwise could exist in that neighborhood. And now that people are figuring out how to do it, they're trying to pair that to make it affordable in a regulatory way. And Santa Cruz did that a couple decades ago. They said in order to build an ADU, it had to be regulated affordable housing, income restricted, and no one did it. And so people have realized that if you have that long-term use restriction on an ADU, it's going to decrease the number of times it happens, and maybe not happen at all. So that's the thing we're struggling with. So you want to create affordable units, and you want to have some regulated affordable units, but you don't want to, kill the goose to get a golden egg. I mean, you don't want to just stop the process entirely.
Yeah. Nicole, I'm going to turn to you on that. What do you think? Incentivizing for more ADUs.
I mean, since
affordable
the Outlet
ADUs
initiative started, our explicit goal has been to increase the income restricted ADUs in Austin. And, we've built around 20. About half of those have been with community development corporations who have affordable housing in their mission. But we've been tapping into just the normal incentive programs that are out there for income restricted units. We've just sort of been like squishing them into the ADU box. But those incentive programs need to be really carefully calibrated, like Eli was saying, to not sort of like over ask, right? Like we've sort of seen that the 5-year affordability period is about what a homeowner will commit to. When you get to like 15 or 20 years, that's a really long time for a homeowner. But then also things like permit fee waivers, tax incentives, just buying down the cost of construction for the unit. Those are all things that we apply to other affordable housing programs, and they should be appropriately calibrated to this type of housing if we want this to be an income restricted option.
Yeah, and I think that, there's a lot of organizations on the city side and the state side, and also private and nonprofit organizations working towards this initiative. So I do think that we're going to see some more interesting solutions when it comes to financing ADUs. Jonathan, anything you have to say on the incentives for ADUs for affordable housing?
We didn't really, we mentioned the challenge of being a developer, but the challenge of being a landlord is also hard, which kind of gets to this point where like you're going to have to limit to low income. So I think those incentives have to be really meaningful. A couple of other ways to approach it. One you mentioned, which is sort of start when the house is new. And so one thought is try, developing a program where 2 people can buy 1 home and, create an accessory dwelling unit as a part of the home or a separate one. And as part of that purchase process, you can create incentives to do that. You can take 2 low-income families and move them into 1 single-family home. So that might be one approach to leveraging the ADU for that point. The other one, which, I'll throw it out there because it's a little bit of a random idea, but I call it the Prius effect. In other words, like the Prius, I don't particularly think is the most beautiful car in the world, but it's a car that when it drives by you, it sort of softly whispers, I'm doing my part to change, the climate. And so, one thought is, how do you make ADUs have that sort of same appeal? I'm doing my part to support the city, as a program. Put a sign in your front yard that shows like you are the one who's really making a difference in your city, and your neighbors are all fundamentally failing in their civic responsibility, right? You can kind of create that ethos. That could work. Again, it's very personal because my house, it's somebody living in my backyard, but that feeling, that effect could be pretty profound.
Yes, that's true. That is for sure the case. Eli and Nicole, any advice for how to navigate city councils that are hesitant to increase density by way of ADUs?
Yeah, and one more thought on the affordability is just remember, we studied almost 15% of ADUs are rented for nothing. So that's the market rate, using them as a safety net for friends or family. I'd love to see an update to that, but some people just No other kind of housing is rented for nothing. But in terms of getting through the political process, this is where stories make all the difference. I mean, every time we waived fees on ADUs, it was like the city council had a member who was in the fire department. He was tired of seeing these illegal squalor situations, and he wanted to have a legal process for them. Or we have now someone on city council whose son is in a wheelchair for the rest of his life and will never be fully independent, but wants to be on the same property as her. There's always a story behind it. And finding the planning commissioner or the city councilor who has a personal story, how they recognize how the ADU is an important part of their life, that's what gets it over the, it's not arguing wonky stuff. And the other is tours. COVID's not a good time for it, but getting people inside them. It's like a green eco roofs. You can't see it from the street. So what's to be excited about? But once you actually get inside and see it, then people start saying, actually, I kind of want to do that on my own.
Partnering with cities and getting the cities involved in those kinds of initiatives. Nicole, any quick thoughts there? I have one more question. We're going to wrap up real quick.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that stories are very meaningful and sort of making those relatable to everybody's lives. I'd also say that ADUs of the missing middle housing spectrum, not to get too wonky, but they are what we've seen the most sort of acceptable form of density in a single family neighborhood. So when we're talking about ADUs, we also talk about all of those other options. And I mean, sometimes that the fear of the fourplex makes the ADU a little bit more acceptable from what we've seen here.
All right, so rounding out, I have a question about utilities, probably Eli and Nicole for you. The impact of utility infrastructure from ADUs. Are ADUs designed with a separate meter, power, water, gas, or part of the primary residence with regards to the utility connections?
In Austin, they do have a separate electric meter. For plumbing, it just depends on what the current service to the property is. For homeowners, it usually doesn't make sense to add a whole nother water tap as long as their existing water tap can serve the additional plumbing fixtures. And that's all regulated by the city. And go ahead, Eli.
Most places, your separate electric service, it's nice to have a choice on the water or sewer, whether you want to have your own tap or go off the existing house. It's usually cheaper for off the existing house, but you can't sub-meter it that way. And this is why we need early adopters, because it's always different. And that's the sort of hiccup you got to kind of get through in a community like Washington, D.C. or Chicago, where they're new to this, figure out how it works, because utilities don't understand ADUs, and figuring out how it works. And then you start getting a lot of them get built.
Great. Thanks, guys. So that'll be it. You can turn your screens off now. Thanks so much for joining us. That was Eli, Nicole, and Jonathan. If you need to get in touch with them, just reach out to the folks at Ivory Innovations or to these folks directly if you got their emails. This has been very, very wonderful. Ivory Innovations, thank you so much for organizing this and putting this together. There's lots of questions we did not answer, but please feel free to reach out to Ivory Innovations, the folks there, and continue the conversation. They are leaders in this space, and you can check out all of the other amazing ideas that these and other entrepreneurs have on ivoryinnovations.org. Please stay in touch. They will have more events, and looking forward to seeing you all again. Thanks very much.